Hi there, Andre here from Peak Motorcycles. In this video I'm going to be solving a problem. So the problem I have is that with my CRF300 Rally, you normally just see it in this position because it's up on a motocross stand when it's in the garage. I've had my suspension done front and back and it is way better than it was when it was stock, especially with me on it. The problem is that I don't have the massive amount of static sag that the standard suspension has. Now this isn't a problem in itself and it's much better for riding. The problem I have is when I put it on the side stand, and because the bike is at least an inch if not higher because of the new suspension, it's now leaning over a really long way. Now it's fine in the garage, I can put it on the side stand, it does lean over a long way, it does take up more space, but it doesn't fall over. What I have found is that if I'm out and about, and especially when I'm having to get off the bike to open or close a gate on the lanes around here, that unless the ground is completely level or even slightly uphill, sort of right to left, then the bike is just really unstable and it takes very little downward slope to put it on the side stand before it's actually almost ready to fall over. I don't particularly want to drop the bike a lot, so the options to fix this would be, I suppose, on the one hand to change the suspension, which I don't really want to do. I could make the side stand longer, which would mean cutting it, welding it, putting it back together again, but I think the easiest option is just to put a block and bolt it onto the end of the side stand. Now I've seen this done by Pip Davidson on the UK CRF300L and Rally Facebook group, and thanks for providing me with this offcut of acetal, which is the same material that was used for that modification. Now what I plan to do with this, this piece is actually 30mm thick, which is an inch and a bit. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the side stand off the bike, I'm going to draw out the size that needs to be on here, I'm going to cut that out, and then I'm actually just going to put the block on exactly as it is, and right now I'll show you why. So this is what the bike is like when it's up on the motocross stand. So if I just take that down, you'll see just how much the bike actually ends up leaning over. There we go. Keep going, and there we go. So hopefully you can see that all right from the video, but it is actually quite a significant lean there. If I just take the block now and go and place it underneath the side stand, you'll see what a big difference it makes. So there we go. So that's with a 30mm block underneath the side stand. Now that would be a massive improvement. The bike's not going to fall over the other way, but it does make it just so much more stable and will be better when I'm on the trails. One other thing I noticed is that when it's up on the block, the side stand foot isn't actually flat all the way along. So what I don't want is actually just have this block exactly as it is. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to just mark out the shape. I'm going to cut the block to the right size. And then at the back end, I'm going to mark it. And it's actually about 4mm that needs to come off. Let's measure that again right to the end. Yeah, so I'm going to basically take 4mm off the back end of it. So it'll be the full width at this end. So the bike will lean over slightly more. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take the side stand off the bike. I'm then going to measure it on here. I'm going to cut the block to the right size. I'm then going to drill some holes. It's going to need probably a hole for a bolt into the foot of the side stand itself, and then to drill that out through on the block on the other side. I'll put some holes on the underneath so I can put some nuts just to hold it in place, and then I shall reassemble it. When I think everything's fine, I'm going to mark off where the 4mm is, and then I'm just going to get it on a belt sander and just take that 4mm off towards the back and then refit it. Here we go. Okay, so this is just a trick just to get the spring off. So what I'm going to do is I've just got a number of 5p's, English 5 pences, and what I'm going to do is I'm just going to push the spring out and then just push those into the gaps. There's a third one, there's a fourth one. There we go, there's one more. So now when I lift that up and the tension comes off the spring, put in a couple more. Okay, there we go. So you can see that's a very pretty design. What that does mean now is that when I take the tension off up there, and we'll come off the hook, just like that. There we go. I'll leave them in there because I'm going to need it that loose to get it back on again. Yeah, that is just how loose that is without the spring on it. Wow. I know that some of the tolerances that Honda make these things to aren't amazing, but that is quite a big gap. Right then, now just to get that bolt out. I think when I put that on, when I put that back on, I think I'm going to have to put some more washers in there. So we can just get this last piece out. Again, another part that Honda don't really grease very much. So that is my side stand off. Now I'm going to go and cut a piece of this block that will then fit over the end of that. So now I will go and trace that out. So this is my block. What I'm going to do is I'm basically going to cut this out like that. So I'm just going to mark up on here with my Sharpie exactly how big I want this to be. I'm going to hopefully have that bit up against that edge, but everything else can be marked off like that. There we go. So that's my shape. So now I've drawn that out, I'm going to have a go at cutting that. So I will go and fetch my jigsaw and hope that the heat from cutting won't melt it too much. So there we go. So I've managed to get it clamped. It's probably the best that I can do for now. Essentially what I was trying to do was to get a flat bit on top so I can actually use a jigsaw with it. But at the same time I don't want to be clamping it through where I'm cutting. So I'm going to try and make that cut there first, then make this cut across, and then once that's done, then I'll try and work out what I can do to stop that clamp from actually holding it. I suspect I might have to take it off and then just put something around the edge or finish it off by hand. Right, here we go. So it is going, it's just pretty slow. The problem I've got is that that is actually moving away from the line. And if I'm not careful, I'm going to be short from where I need to be. Okay, so that is still okay, but I can't come in any more than that. It is making quite a nice cut at least. So with that, basically I need to measure 4mm up on that edge, which isn't very much. That is kind of to there, and then from that, draw a line down the other end. So it's not really a lot to take off. It really is quite minimal, but it will just mean that more of this pad is in contact with the ground. So I'll just cut that. You can quite see that on there, but trust me, it is. And I'll cut that and then I'm ready to drill. Okay, so that's the first hole drilled. So I was struggling with clamping this a bit, so all I've done is I've actually just put a big wood screw through the front bit just to hold that in place, and that's going to make it, I hope, a lot easier just to position that exactly right. The problem is that I don't want to go too close to the edge, because then it won't go that far into the block, but I also don't want to cut off the weld. But that there looks about perfect, so clamp all of that off. Okay, that's good. So that's the 2 holes drilled in the foot. Next thing to do is to drill the same 2 holes in the same 2 places in the pad. So the next thing I need to do is just mark up the holes where this needs to be drilled. Okay, so you probably can't quite see it on there. I've put it under the light, but one's there. The other one is actually just in enough. So I'm hoping that will be close enough to the edge to give it enough strength. Right, I'll clamp that down and get that drilled. So this one here is really just to stop it from rocking backwards accidentally. So the very last thing to do is to drill in some holes a short distance into the bottom, just so that the nuts will be sunken into the base. I need to drill them quite big because I want to be able to get a socket on the end of it. It's going to be a bit easier for this one. For that one, it's going to put it a little bit closer to the edge, but that's on the inside, so I don't think that really matters. So yeah, here we go. Oh, just a little bit more. So that socket won't quite fit in, but I think I've got that's the biggest drill bit I've got, so I'm going to have to find a thinner walled socket, I think, to make that work. Yeah, that's fine. So now the same again for the other one. I think that's all good. So what I forgot to do before I bolted that on was to set the camera recording again. But essentially what I've done is I've put some black paint where I've drilled the holes just to stop it from rusting. I then found that even with the smallest 10mm socket that I had, I couldn't fit it into these holes. So rather than drill the holes bigger, I've actually just put the bolts in from underneath. And then on the top, you can just see that, there's the two nylock nuts. That's not working, there we go. On the top there's the two nylock nuts, which are just holding that in place. Feels pretty solid. Most of the force is downwards on this anyway, so I'm not that worried about having the bolts in that way up. Right, so the next thing to do is just to refit it. I'm just going to grease it all up again, put it back in, put a washer in just to stop that bit of a wobble on the side stand when it's on. So here we go, I'll do this quickly. Maybe that washer doesn't actually go in now. Oops, put it on the right way around. There's a bit of room, but that washer I've got is actually too big. So maybe the gap actually isn't as big as it seemed like there was quite a lot of movement, but I can't get a washer in there. So I just need to get some thinner washers, I think. Okay, there's that on. That still does feel really loose, but there's not even enough room to get a washer that thin in there. So yeah, I guess it's just because of the length of the side stand that it seems worse than it is. Right, the next one is the lock nut to go on the back. Now then, because of me still getting to grips with my new Sony ZV-1 camera that I'm using to do this video, it has this rather annoying thing where it turns off after 5 minutes when recording in 4K and makes no announcement of it. So what you've just missed is me pulling all of the 5-pensers out of the spring just to put that back on, which is a shame because it made a lovely sound and that would have been good sped up. However, this infernal camera doesn't like to record more than 5 minutes. I've turned the setting on now so that it will allow it to get warmer. I'm in the garage, it's pretty cold out here, so I'm sure it'll be fine. But I think that the number of times I've had to redo shoots as part of this video means that I'm probably going to switch to my GoPro after this and only use the ZV-1 for short clips. Anyway, that is now back on. I need to fit the side stand sensor, which is just this one here. That is all good, back on. And then the very last piece to put back on is the guard. And there we go, that is all back on as it should be. So the last thing to try is to take it off the motocross stand, put it back on the side stand. Hopefully this block will then be level with the ground and the bike will be standing at a reasonable angle. And there we go. That feels pretty solid. And when I get down and look at that closely, it's pretty flat along the ground as well. So yeah, happy with that. Just see what it's like when I actually get on the bike. I suspect getting on with the side stand down will now be a challenge. Yeah, that'll just basically just knock it over that way. But that is actually fine for me to ride. So yeah, pleased with that. So just to give you a look how the bike is now on that side stand. As you can see, it's a lot more upright than it was, whereas the side stand is in pretty good contact with the ground. I think if anything, I could make it slightly shorter, but I think I'm maybe only talking about 3 to 5 millimeters. So what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to leave it as it is. I'm going out trail riding tomorrow. I'll see how it fares. If it's okay, I'll leave it, because I think the plastic will ultimately wear down over time. But if it's good like that and I get around tomorrow without any problems, then I'll leave it as it is. If I'm finding that it's still a little bit too upright, I think I can take a few millimeters off the level that's on the bottom there. So yeah, just to give you a view of how the bike now looks from the front. Hopefully that is visible. I guess without this being completely level, it's difficult to tell how much the bike is leaning over, but rest assured that is leaning over just about enough. It certainly doesn't feel like it's too vertical, it's going to wobble. Maybe with a load of luggage on that would push it down a little bit, so for that maybe I need to make it slightly shorter. But I think for how it is now, and certainly I guess it's going to wear a little bit on the ground over time, I think that's good enough. So there you go, that's my video on how to make the side stand about 30mm longer if you've lifted your bike because you've had the suspension done and it doesn't sag as much as it did before. It's been a bit of a learning experience. I think there's a few things I do differently next time. Forget using a jigsaw to cut the material. I'd certainly suggest using a handsaw for it. I think if I did it again, I'd also cut it almost a bit flared, so it works both as a block underneath the foot and also it spreads the load out a bit more just for soft ground. One other thing as well, I think, when you're drilling the holes, if it's possible to actually drill through both the foot and then through the block as well, then I think you can be 100% sure the holes will line up. You could then put one bolt through and then do the other one. I didn't, I marked it. It was almost right, but I think I was probably about 0.5 millimeter out, which doesn't sound like a lot, but then when you're trying to push these back through into the metal foot, that 0.5 millimeter means that actually it was such a good fit other than that, that the 0.5 millimeter meant I couldn't get one of the bolts through. I have lost a few bits of video from doing this, mainly because this Sony ZV-1 kept turning off after 5 minutes without any warning. So if there's a few bits where I've skipped ahead, I haven't done it on purpose. It's just a technology problem that I'm dealing with. Anyway, hopefully it's given you most of the useful things. So how to get the side stand off, how to draw around for the block, what shape the block needs to be, the fact that a few millimeters have to come off the back, and then how it goes back on again. And the fact that even though there's a bit of a wiggle in that side stand, the thinnest washer I have in the right size is still too thick to go in, so maybe it's not so bad. So yeah, all in all, really pleased with that. I'll be going out trail riding tomorrow. I'm going to use this for a while. Then I'll have a look and see how it's wearing on the bottom of the foot. If it looks like it is actually wearing away, then I'll probably leave it, at least until I've got some more luggage on it. But otherwise, yeah, pretty pleased with that. Hopefully this has been interesting and useful. If it has, please like and subscribe if that's your thing. And if it isn't, then don't. That's fine. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.